So, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming during Thanksgiving weekend. I wanted to say that this is a really beautiful setting for something like this, and I want to thank Craig and Esther. Where are you? I'm not sure where they are. Oh, they're at the front. Okay. Well, they have been in curling for years and years, so we were blessed with this facility as a result of their membership. So before I launch into some sort of formal, introduction, I think I'll just open it up to the two gentlemen while we wait for Nate. And if you want to ask any question of either one of them, it's all up to you what you want to do. Raise your hand and, oh, yes, go for it.
Hi. I wanted to ask, this is a question for both of you today. We've been having ongoing issues with transit in and out of the Sarnia area, and it has been an ongoing problem for quite some time. Things looked like they were going to be rectified a few years back, but nothing ever happened. It's incredibly difficult for people that maybe don't drive or don't want to drive to get from here to London, here to Toronto, for appointments, for catching a flight, etc. So I wonder, and again for both of you, I wonder if you have any thoughts on what you can do to help us with that problem.
So I'll tell you, my earliest memory of Sarnia was that my dad's a chemical engineer. So every year he'd come to Sarnia for something. And we used to, my earliest memory when we were little, me and my brother and my mom, we'd take him to the train station in Kingston. He would take the train to Sarnia. And so that's one of my earliest memories. But I believe that that train doesn't exist and hasn't existed for a while. So I think restoring a train service would be something that would help, and it would help not just bring people but to visit Sarnia, but it would make businesses more likely to locate here, and just help people want to live here or be able to live here. So that's one thing I think that we should be looking at. I know that in northeastern Ontario, the Northlander train is another service that was cut. Now, you always have to balance what's the cost of the service versus what's the benefits. But I think that what we should be doing is kind of doing an analysis of what is the long-term benefit to a community of having something like a train service or a bus service. Because if you only look at the short term, you'll say, oh, this costs money, we gotta cut it. But a lot of times, if you cut something, whether it's transportation or healthcare or schools, education, infrastructure or services, you're hurting the long-term potential of a community. And I think that Sarnia is a place that has long-term economic potential. So if you're just looking at dollars and cents, you could probably still make a case, I think, that it's worth it to bring back the train service. But of course, there's more than dollars and cents. The other thing I would just mention is there is this provincial program, I think it's called like Community Transportation Program, something like that. It's rural bus service that's subsidized by the province, but it's designed a little bit differently in each local community. And I think around Prescott and I think around Cobourg and maybe Simcoe County, there are examples of these bus services that, for example, take a whole bunch of students from where they live to where they go to school, or people from where they live to where they work. It just has to be designed to fit the community needs. And so that's another program that I don't know if it exists here. There's about 20 of them in Ontario. Maybe there is one in the region. I'm just not familiar with that.
Thank you for asking the question, and I agree with everything Ted has said, and I'll add by saying that I have a dream, and my dream is that we have a GO service across the province. You will all remember when Bill Davis, not all of us maybe, but I've read it. The purpose behind the GO service was to connect Ontario. The GO in GO stands for Government of Ontario. And somehow we stopped once we built it just around Greater Toronto and perhaps now Hamilton area. And I think it's really, as a province that is growing, the lack of that kind of service is holding us back. One of the things that I have heard again and again, and when I came to Sarnia last time, I had an opportunity to meet with Mayor Bradley. He told me this, and I've heard this from other mayors across this province, that we want our share of people in this community. As this province is growing, young people are building their lives, new people are coming to make Ontario their home. How do we get them to live in Sarnia? How do we get them to live in Brantford, in Belleville, in Sudbury, in Cornwall, in Sault Ste. Marie? There are beautiful mid-sized communities in this province. And that ties in with the housing challenge as well, right? Because yes, there is a big issue around housing supply in big urban centers like Greater Toronto and Hamilton area or Ottawa, where I come from. But there is ample opportunity to grow communities like Sarnia. But we will not be successful to get those people to come and live here if there is lack of connectivity. Connectivity both in terms of trains, good roads, connectivity in terms of good internet service so that young people, that professional class can live virtually. So if you look at my platform, you will see this theme that runs through all of it. I think Ted in his economic platform speaks around that connectivity as well because it's important for the economic viability of our province. So yes, having train, yes, we can advocate to VIA to restore the service, but I think Ontario, as a population of 18 million people, in a decade will be roughly 20 million people, which is a significant size, should start really proactively looking at expanding GO service, whether it's train, it's bus, the entire network, so that it's not just limited to one part of this province, but connects the entire province to all the major urban centers.
Hi there. My name is Anne Marie Gillis. I know you, Yasser. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to meet you yet, Ted. I want to kind of go back a little bit to the Catherine Wynne time when she was premier, and I think you, Yasser, were in her cabinet. She had a very good program for autism. And as many of you may or may not know, I'm a grandparent of autistic children. Ford government took that framework that Kathleen Wynne had put in place, which worked beautifully, by the way, so that there were many children that could receive the care that they needed, especially when they were young, because 2 to 5 are the critical times for autism. And yet, even though the Ford government adopted it, in the next election cycle, they abandoned it. So they love to tell everyone how much money they put into the autistic file. They have 8,000 kids currently enrolled, as I understand, but that's the same 8,000 kids that have been enrolled for the last 8 years. They have 60,000 children on the waiting list. 60,000 children. By the time those children are eligible for funding, they will have aged out. So we've lost that whole capacity. And you can imagine what it's like, well, maybe you can. But what we had under the Catherine Wynne programs was an integrated policy that incorporated the educational system as well as the medical system that came together and culminated in the educational schools. So instead of working individually in their own silos, everyone came together, and that one child would have their multiple facets, but it was all brought in under the auspices of the educational system, but the money wasn't donated from the educational system, if you understand what I'm saying. And I know Nate's coming in. Yes, we're just speaking about autism, Nate. So my question to both of you is, and you know, may not know the file that well, but you know what I'm talking about, Yasser. Would you see to reinstate that program that worked so well, so much so that the Ford government had adopted it, used it, and then abandoned it?
Vance.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, for that introduction to a very important issue. And let's be honest, when we first came up with the program, we got it wrong as well. And we fixed it by actually speaking with with parents and grandparents of autistic children. And I remember that distinctly, is that we thought we came up with the right program, and then when we start speaking with parents who live with the reality, with the children who needs the services, then we got it right. And I think for me, that was a very important learning moment, that when you're coming up with programs, government has a tendency through working with the bureaucracy thinking, oh, we will know the answer. We've talked to enough experts, and the real experts are the people who actually use the service. And Ford government then also, because they came into office and saying everything that liberals did was just so bad that we're going to just undo it, they really did a huge disservice by actually undoing a good program that was starting to work. I think all three of us probably met that one parent in Thunder Bay who have she made sure that she spoke to all of us. She has 2 autistic children. One of them is getting service, the other is not getting service, and one of them is getting so much money for the service that she's got about $50,000 sitting in her bank account that she now cannot even use for the one child she's getting the services for, and she cannot use that money for her second child. Like, it's just it defied common sense as she was trying to describe to all of us the challenges that she's going through. She cannot use any of the money for respite for herself and her husband, so they can even have even a date night while they're trying to raise 2, not 1 but 2 children with autism. So the short answer, Anne-Marie, is yes, we need to go back to talk to parents. We don't know by time in 2026, if we all work hard and get back into government, where things will be. But if I'm the leader, if I am chosen as the premier, my number 1 task would be on that particular file is go back to parents and say, how can we fix this program so it actually works for you, and the 60,000+ children who are on the list can be taken off the list as quickly as possible.
I think I remember that conversation with the mother in Thunder Bay as well, and one of her kids was diagnosed, I think, around 1 year old, very early, and it was so much of a benefit to have that early diagnosis, and it's very painful. It's just a painful reminder of what's happening to all the kids who are on this waiting list who are not getting treatment and waiting, and some of them will age out. And again, one of the things we need to do is not to have this artificial cutoff at a certain age for certain services. Kids should be evaluated as to where they are in their development. And I guess there's a term for that, needs-based. But anyways, the idea is, and this applies to other things like fetal alcohol syndrome disorder. It's early intervention really makes a lot of difference, and then you have to look at where each kid is in terms of their development and their needs, instead of just saying, okay, at 12 years old you lose this, and at 18 years old you lose that. So I think those are some of the things that we need to look at. But as Yasser says, the important thing is to get the feedback from the parents and the grandparents.
Hello everyone, so I'm Nader Smith, and apologize for being late. Best of intentions, we're here anyway for the weekend, and then my 3-year-old, you'll hear giggling in the corner there, was sick the last couple of days, so he's okay now, but as a result, we weren't able to come down yesterday. On the question of autism, Henry, last time I was here, I spent the bulk of my time talking to your daughter about this very issue, and it really comes down to 2 things. I think one is in the school system, making sure that we reinvest in special education, because there's a challenge, especially depending where you live in this province. You do not get the same services in our public education system if you got a kid with autism or special needs. The second piece is really around the specific autism program, and there are 2 challenges to it. I think early assessment actually is generally pretty good right now, but then there's not the support for people who are assessed, and it's backwards, because early intervention makes all of the difference, and we know that. It's better for the kids, better for families, better for our society at large, and we are penny pinching, ultimately, at the expense of our kids. And so what is the answer? I think the answer is twofold. You're not going to be able to snap your fingers and reinvest in a program like that and solve it all at once, But you gotta start to make a commitment to reduce the backlog and reinvest in that program at the same time as you deliver transparency for families. Because it is unconscionable that parents of kids with autism have had to use access to information requests to find out about the state of the backlog and how much time it's really going to take. People need to plan their lives. And if they aren't going to be able to get the services right away, they need to know that, and they need to know exactly how long they're going to be waiting.
Yes, good. Oh, we're going to start now with our actual agenda. And so one of the things that we decided to do was open this forum to the public. And not knowing what to expect with that, we decided to structure the event with some questions. And the gentleman might not know this, but I teach ethics and I teach debating. So if it resembles like putting your hand up a little bit and a formalized debate style, it's I'm sorry, it's just brought over from my other life. But what we did is we consulted with individuals in the community and came up with a list of questions. So I sent those questions to each of you. There are 4 that are designed for the first hour, and then the questions during the second hour are specific to each one of you. So the first hour, though, will demand that you put up your hand if you want to answer, and hopefully we have a strident rebuttal associated with each. So we have 3 minutes for...
Do I go with 3?
Pardon?
Still go with 3 then, or?
Oh, do you want to go with 2? Because
Yeah,
we'll go with 2. Gary is our timekeeper, and I defer to him always. And so we will have a response. I'll state the question, and then whoever wants to answer it, I feel uncomfortable about this, treating them as children. Put your hand up, and then a rebuttal will come from one of the 3, and we'll get through it that way. And we structured the second hour to have a response from everyone, so just in case one is more outspoken than the other 2. So thank you to...
Don't feel with this crowd.
Right? So rowdy. Liberals are known for being there rowdy.
For time-wise, you'll see the time countdown here. I'll do this, and at 30 seconds, you'll get the yellow, and at 5 seconds, you'll get the red. And at 0 seconds, you'll get the alarm.
I told him he had to leave his hook at home, so that's at least there's that. So if that's an agreeable structure for you, thank you. First of all, thank you so much to all 3 of you for taking time out of your Thanksgiving to come to Sarnia-Lambton. We really appreciate it, and we know it was sort of impromptu, right? How this happened, but can't thank you enough for on behalf of our community for joining us today. And we're really looking forward to hearing your answers to some of the most pressing issues for Ontario today. So I'm going to start. I will start. First question. The best known candidate and the one leading in the polls is not here with us today at the forum. The party made some important changes to the voting process involved with electing its leader. Overall popularity doesn't carry the same weight now, with each separate electoral district having 100 points, regardless of the size of that district. Is that change why you are here today? And do you believe the new system can impact the results overall? Ted, you were first?
Okay.
Yeah.
The new system is great for rebuilding the party because every single riding counts the same, whether it's Toronto Centre or Sarnia-Lambton. And in fact, that is making us travel to every single riding because the points are completely spread out. I will dispute one of the premises of the question, which is I don't know if Bonnie Crombie is really the front runner because all the polls don't take into account the fact that each riding counts the same. And a voter in, I was just in Chatham-Kent-Leamington, where I know there's 150 members. Each voter there has the same weight as 10 voters, maybe in Toronto Centre. So the voters in southwestern Ontario count for a lot, and the polls don't know that. So I don't even know who is the front runner. And maybe we should be taking a little straw poll here at the end. It'll make the news. We have the press here, and that might be kind of interesting because it has the advantage over every other poll you've seen in that it actually polls members. And all the other polls are just phone polls of random people, and they don't know if they're members or not. In fact, probably 99% of them are not members. So I would propose that you do a straw poll here. Just
There's really, I bet there's not much to rebut with this. But
No, I would just say this, that Ted is absolutely right. This is really an important step we have taken in opening up the party by making sure that it's just not a purview of very few people who show up at a convention and the super delegates. And you know, I think all three would have qualified as super delegates without getting elected by by members of the party in our local riding associations are the one deciding. We have given an opportunity to all party members to decide, and all 5 of us spend a lot of time signing up new members. The party membership is 100,000 plus now, as I understand, which is historic for Ontario Liberal Party, and that's how you're going to build a party. Ted is also right that the 100-point system allows us to pay attention to every single 104 ridings. And I've been arguing that this is exactly what it will take to build our party and to defeat Doug Ford in 2026. My number one job, if you give me the opportunity to serve as the leader of our party, is to build 124 riding associations, and so that local liberals like yourself are able to help elect a local liberal of a member of provincial parliament, because that's how politics is always done, and that's how we have to do politics. I was very similar to Ted, was in Lambton, Kent, Middlesex. I was actually knocking on doors and going to local Liberals members. I found Ted supporters, I found Nate supporters, I got Yasser supporters. There were 1 or 2 Bonnie supporters as well. It didn't feel like a blowout for one particular candidate.
And I suppose I would say, as a starting point, I'll speak to the rules. I'm really here for one reason. I'm not here because of the rule change. I'm here, as I think my colleagues are, for one simple reason. This is the best way to make a difference. We have a party that only has 9 seats now at Queen's Park. We face a really frustrating conservative majority government. I want better out of our politics. I want better for our province. And if you want better, then the answer is participation. And for me, 10 years ago, that meant participating in federal politics because we need to renew our federal party. And today, it means participating in provincial politics and rebuilding our provincial party so we can rebuild our province. Now, those rule changes, they matter when it comes to rebuilding our party. Why do I say that? Because, you know, I represent a riding in the east end of Toronto. Don't hold it against me. And my father-in-law, who spent his whole life in Kamlaki here, he does not feel as represented by this Ontario Liberal Party as he should. And too many people see it as a Toronto party and have seen it that way. Buckarai didn't help in the last election. And so I do think it's incredibly important. It's incumbent on all of us, and it's important to have a process that pushes candidates to rebuild this party absolutely everywhere in every corner of this province, in small communities and large communities and everywhere in between. Now, on the question of name recognition, I would just say, I don't think anyone has name recognition in this race. And why do I say that? Because no one is Justin Trudeau. No one is coming in and known absolutely everywhere. Is the mayor of Mississauga known in Mississauga more than Ted, Yasser, or myself? Yeah, of course, of course. Am I better known in Beaches, East York? Of course. Is Ted better known in Kingston? Of course. Is Yasser better known in Ottawa Centre? Of course. But across the province, very few people know any of us. And that's the work that we have to undertake as a party to rebuild this party everywhere. And I'll just close. I was in Sioux Lookout at a Legion. And someone said to me, oh, you're going to have a tough time. Because Bonnie Crombie, you know, she's a legacy, the Crombie family. David Crombie was a legacy. He was, they're not related. So it's you know, no one is known. We're all going to work to be known to rebuild this party.
Thank you. My next question comes from precariously housed youth in our community. So they're listening very carefully to your answers. What steps will the party take under your leadership to support job creation and opportunities for youth employment in Ontario, specifically in rural communities? Would like to
You start off.
I'll go first. Well, the agri-food sector is the biggest sector of the economy here in Ontario. And I think that's one of the places where we should be looking for opportunities. One of the things that I think is important about the agri-food sector is to try to add value. And the way I put it is like sell cheese instead of selling milk, sell wine instead of selling grapes. Those opportunities to add value to the agricultural products is something that we should be looking at. I think that we should be making it easier for young farmers to take on farming as a career, as a life. One of the things I'd like to do is to preserve farmland, but we also need to help with succession planning, whether it's helping young farmers get loans for equipment or to buy land. And there are also mentorship opportunities, I think, between existing farmers and the next generation of farmers. We also have Lambton College here, and I think it's really important when some industry is looking to locate here that Lambton College is ready and say, hey, what kind of skills do you need? We can provide the skills training. Talk to us. The great thing about colleges compared to universities is colleges are very versatile. They can turn on a dime and provide the training that a particular company needs when they locate to the area. And so that's an opportunity I think we should be taking advantage of.
You want me to go?
I can go. So when it comes to job creation specifically for young people, I want to take a step back and talk about job creation generally as government and then be specific around young people, because I think one challenge is it's hard for governments to just simply create jobs. What is the role of government? The role of government is, when I sat down with OFA and some ag folks in Watford, they talked about integrated infrastructure. That the government's role isn't to necessarily subsidize companies to create jobs, but where companies are interested in making investments, and we need, for example, investments in infrastructure, the roads and bridges. We need investments in broadband. We need investments in water. We need to make sure that municipalities are supported by the province to make sure these investments in integrated infrastructure so that businesses make the investments that we need and jobs are created. Now, on youth in particular, though, there is an opportunity in a couple of different fronts, I would say. One, any provincial program has to be coordinated with the federal program that already exists in the Youth Employment Strategy, Canada Summer Jobs, because there's a lot of money that comes in federally to directly subsidize for-profit, but especially non-profit organizations to hire young people in the summer. Second, there need to be major investments on the post-secondary side in terms of internships and apprenticeships and making sure that we maintain those investments and we strengthen those investments. Lastly, there are some particular areas where we do need major action, and young people should play a critical role. And I was glad when I saw Biden announce a commitment to a youth climate corps and got some fanfare. I was a bit frustrated because our commitment to do the same in our climate plan hadn't received quite the same fanfare. But there are particular issues around job creation for young people that the government should pursue directly, where it coincides with provincial priorities, including around climate action, adaptation, and resilience in that way. And so there are, I think, many different ways to think about the challenge. It's hard, though, just simply to say government's going to be responsible for hiring everyone directly. Government's got to be a partner with the private sector in getting those jobs created.
So, as I've been traveling across the province in this campaign, I've learned a few things. I've learned a few things about myself. But the one thing that has struck me the most thus far is how our young people have lost hope or losing hope about the future. And it really saddens me. The number of conversations that I've had with young people who go to university or college who have spoken to me about looking at moving out of Ontario once they've done their education has really taken me by surprise. And I've spent a lot of time talking to these young people to convince them otherwise, that they're needed, how much we need their talent, how much we need their energy, or try to understand, why have you lost hope? I've just never seen that in my own province before. And so I think one of the things that any one of us who's elected has to do is to rebuild, reestablish that hope in the future. That this place, this province, this country is worth being part of. And we need our young people to help build this province. And that there are opportunities abound for them. And I know it seems like a hokey sort of answer, but I really think it goes to the genesis of things that we have to do is by establishing that there's something better. I think climate change, I agree with Nate, is a big part of it. Young people are not feeling that there's something to look for, and I think we need to make sure by investing and taking climate change as a serious issue, looking at the economic opportunities that come with it, that we can start creating that hope again for young people in our province in Ontario.
Thank you. I think one more question for each of them before we take a break. We have time for. So here we go. This is the one that everyone gets worked up about. The Ford government dissolved the ceiling on what landlords can charge for rent. What is your plan to address the growing and significant issue of affordable housing and homelessness in Ontario associated with the unaffordability of rent?
I can start. So I would pull it into two questions around addressing housing writ large, which obviously impacts homelessness, but then there have to be specific strategies around homelessness as well. And so first, broadly speaking on housing, what do we need to do? Well, we need to make sure we have municipal leadership, but we especially have provincial leadership. One, to end exclusionary zoning, make sure we build gentle density everywhere, greater density near transit and near education institutions. And two, make sure that we get governments back in the game in building non-market housing. And there are organizations like Metrolinx, for example, that own a lot of land, and there's a piece of land sold in my own riding by Metrolinx, sold for tens of millions of dollars. It's near a GO station, near a subway station, and not a single affordable unit is being built on that site. So we need the market to deliver, and we need to end all barriers to that smart, sustainable growth, and that's a density conversation. Two, making sure that governments get back in the game on building non-market housing, affordable rental, workforce housing, co-op housing. There are many different ways of thinking about what kind of non-market housing we need. And lastly, we need to treat housing as a home first and an investment second. Now, when it comes to homelessness in particular, we are right now downloading these responsibilities and leaving municipalities to fend for themselves. And we need to make sure we invest, and the federal government's done some good work on this around rapid housing. The provincial government has to step in and be a partner for municipalities on rapid housing solutions as well. We also need to make sure that the province funds wraparound supports for those transitional housing projects. It's not enough to just have the housing unit. We need to make sure we're providing supports for people in need so they can get back on their feet and succeed. And that's again where this provincial government is entirely missing, to the point that the Ontario Business Improvement Association, rightly, in the last budget cycle called for investments in mental health and addictions. So it's housing, market, non-market, and specific strategies around homelessness that speak to housing, but also speak to wraparound mental health supports.
In order for us to really meaningfully solve the housing crisis, all levels of government have to work together. Not one level of government can do this. This is a collective effort. In addition to the private sector, the people who actually build housing, and of course the not-for-profit sector to ensure that we have got affordable social housing in our system as well. There's three things in my view that needs to happen. One, I think the government needs to take all the taxes and administrative fees, all bulked together called development charges. Let's lift that cost out. Everybody's talking about GST. That's a very small part of the picture. Development charges in total add about $100,000 or so per unit. We should pull that cost. We should give that money to municipalities as a province, because that's to build public infrastructure. And we can use that as an incentive to build more density, just like Nate is talking about. Let's use that as an incentive. Number two, all three orders of government own a lot of land, a lot of surplus land across the province. Let's use that to build affordable housing. I've been, as a member of parliament at the federal level, That's what I've been advocating to federal government. I represent a riding in Ottawa. We have a lot of federal land which is sitting empty. Why are we not building affordable social housing? You and I already own that land. We should not be selling it for profit. And lastly, the point I was making around spreading the population across the province. Let's invest in connectivity so that we're just not exacerbating the housing crisis in big urban centers, that we are actually benefiting all communities across the Ontario by investing in the necessary infrastructure. So Sarnia gets to grow as well as Ottawa.
So I'm gonna, you know what, I agree with what Native Yasser is saying. So let me try to add to the conversation by, I'm gonna pretend to be Doug Ford for 10 seconds. He's gonna say, you liberals, you just wanna spend money on all of this, where are you gonna get the money from? And here's how I'm gonna answer him. Look, one thing we could do is when a municipality rezones a piece of land and says, okay, you can now build 6 stories on this piece of land. The value of the land all of a sudden goes up. So what you could do is you could give municipalities the ability to tax the increase in value of the land when they change the zoning. Because you can do that with the stroke of a pen. Now, are developers going to be happy with that? Actually, yes. Because more land is likely to be so-called upzoned. Because why? Because municipalities will say, hey, we could take that money and we could put it into affordable housing somewhere else or any other municipal need. The second thing I would say is that if municipalities or governments build housing that's a little bit below market, you can actually do it without too much cash outlay. Just to give you an example, in about 10 years ago, they built a seniors affordable housing apartment building in Kingston. It was about 80% of market rent, so not deeply affordable, but it was below market, only for seniors. And they did an assessment. They had a guy come in to assess the value of the place 7 years later. And the assessment said, hey, there's been a 3% return on investment in this apartment building. And in fact, around that time, that's about how much it cost the city of Kingston to borrow money, 3%. And the thing is, when you build something, people are paying rent, that's a revenue source. Now, the city of Kingston didn't make any money because 3% money coming in, 3% money going out for the interest payments. But governments are not in the business of trying to maximize return on capital. But it didn't cost that much cash to build a below market apartment. So that's my answer to Doug Ford. You can do it, it's not going to cost you that much, and you get all the social benefits.
Thank you, all 3 gentlemen, thank you. And I like that you brought Doug Ford here today.
Yeah, we're going to bring it in.
But he didn't say folks, you know, that was the one thing.
Folks and all shops.
He doesn't say folks when he's trying to attack people.
That's true, that's a very good point. I would like us to have a 10-minute break, and in that space, have the candidates grab some food and maybe use the facilities, but also interact with the guests here, or the audience here, so that they can get a chance to know you a little bit. And when we come back from that, then we'll have specific questions addressed to you, if that's okay with you. All right, thank you, and yeah, please enjoy the food, everyone.
We didn't give you a lot of debate between us, did we?
No, no, you did not. You're quite agreeable people.
Thank you.
These are questions that have come from social media, as well as a group of youth who are precariously housed. So they're very thoughtfully placed before you, and very hopefully placed before you as well. So, Ted, well, we're going to start with you in this question, and I'm sorry for the long-windedness of the context. We know there's a reliance on privatization with the Ford government and a diminishing quality in many areas of life for all Ontarians, even with social programming management like Ontario Works. Instead of repairing the system and the stagnancy of funds for something as essential as ODSP, we are seeing large international conglomerate firms hired to manage the issues. Ted, how will you address the poverty associated with families who experience the reality of Ontario Works and ODSP?
One of the things I did in this past year in the legislature, so as an MPP, I can go and bug Doug Ford. I was the only MPP this past session to speak about the threshold, clawback threshold. So people on ODSP who can work part-time, it used to be that if they earned over $200 a month, they would get 50% of anything they earned clawed back. They're paying the same marginal tax rate as Doug Ford, which is what I said in my speech in the legislature. So what I said was, this isn't right. And I think that if you bug the Ford government enough, you can get results. I cannot take credit for this, but the Ford government did increase the threshold to $1,000. So now anybody on ODSP can earn up to $1,000 a month and not have any income clawed back. And I think we need to keep pushing the Ford government. We need to increase OW and ODSP. I'd like to have a minimum wage that varies from place to place depending on the local cost of living. And I'd like to see the OW and ODSP rates somehow tied to the minimum rate, so minimum wage, so they all kind of go up when inflation happens. A lot of people who are talking to me, they talk to my constituency office, and it's hard to listen to the stories of how they're suffering with the increases in rent and groceries. And so there has to be a cost of living adjustment.
Would either of you like to also add?
I'd be happy to add. So federally, I have co-chaired the All-Party Anti-Poverty Caucus, and I have obviously supported the Canada Child Benefit and strengthened GIS, but what I can take some credit for is leading efforts on the Canada Workers Benefit. We've lifted tens of thousands of people out of poverty, and that tracks back to a resolution I put forward in my caucus back in 2016. I've also been part of really pushing the federal government to deliver much faster passage of the Canada Disability Benefit. So when I think about provincial politics, I want to take that same approach of, obviously we need confidence and we need a strong economic agenda, we need in everything we do integrity, but fairness for those in need is absolutely essential to deliver as Liberals. And what does that mean at the provincial level? Well, it means strengthened ODSP, the Ontario Disability Support Program. It means strengthened Ontario Works. ODSP is now tied to its index to inflation. OW is not, and it needs to be. We need to significantly increase rates so that we reduce poverty to a large degree. We also need to make sure, though, that, to Ted's point, that we make sure the clawback doesn't hit people so very hard. And so when we deliver the Canada Child Benefit, it is progressively phased down. It's not phased down on a 50-cent basis by when you hit a certain threshold. It's phased down in a progressive way. The more you earn, the less you get. Whereas it's great that they increased the limit. It's still a hard 50% clawback when you hit that limit. And we have to address the clawback rates as well to make sure that we not only support people, but we also address and reduce and remove any disincentive to work.
Income insecurity is at the heart of so many of the challenges people are facing right now. Food insecurity, housing insecurity, poverty in general, bad health. And some of the most meaningful work that I have been able to do in my elected life is when I was part of the provincial government that actually came up with the basic income model. We looked at it, we actually had a cabinet committee that I was a member of, that was asked by the Premier to come up with a model in the province of Ontario that will allow for income security, especially for those who are most marginalized. The late Hugh Siegel was an advisor to us, who gave us some incredible advice for us to develop this model. And it is a very sad day that around this point in time around, we would have had some important data upon which we could have taken some meaningful policy action, not only in Ontario, but anywhere in Canada. And so I continue to be an advocate for that type of model. I think what federal government did during the pandemic through CERB, where everybody got $2,000, it was a part of a basic income model. And I am arguing at the federal government, should have got that we must have some data that must have accumulated through that period that we can use to make better policy decisions in actually undermining income insecurity. And Ontario should once again lead in that effort.
Perfect timing. Okay, next. Many areas have been negatively impacted in education with their support services. Mental health involved with student care is underfunded in resources at all levels of our education system. Nate, how will your team when in government address these systemic issues?
So I was just talking about education with past educators, and I mentioned my first experience in politics was actually on the picket line in the Harris years. My parents were both teachers. It's a great motivating force to get involved in politics and to want better from politics. And as I just said, this Ford government isn't as ideological as that Harris government, but they are deeply incompetent and they don't prioritize public education. And what we see is an underinvestment. So in the last budget, they put some new dollars on the table, but less than half of inflation, and that is going to lead to cuts and challenges. And so what is the answer? Well, we need to make sure we invest inside and outside of the classroom. Inside the classroom, and I mentioned in answer to Anne-Marie's question, we need to invest in special education in our classrooms all across this province. We don't invest enough. We also need to make sure we invest sufficiently so that we can cap class sizes at a reasonable number in partnership and collaboration with teachers and educators. Now, we also need to make sure we make investments outside of the classroom, and that's definitely, you mentioned mental health, and there need to be mental health supports as connected into our school system. We also need to make sure that we have a universal school food program, that's a healthy school food program, that we don't want any barrier to kids succeeding in school. And that's really, I think, what the goal has to be. We have to make sure we deliver excellence inside and outside the classroom to set our kids up for success.
One of the biggest challenges of post-secondary students is mental health. When you ask them, that's what they'll say. I think that universities and colleges have made strides in helping students with mental health, in detecting problems, preventing problems, helping students cope, and then treatment in certain cases. But that requires money. And Doug Ford, you cut tuition, you froze tuition, and then you didn't compensate the universities and colleges for those cuts. And for example, my home institution of Queen's University is running a deficit this year. These mental health costs, they're not covered by OHIP. We've got to fund our post-secondary institutions correctly so that they will be able to provide good education, but also provide the supports the students need to be in a good frame of mind to get the most benefit out of their I just can never forget, my dad told me when I went off to university, these are some of the best years of your life, don't waste any time. But if you're struggling with mental health, in any sense, you're not going to get the most out of those years. So we've got to put the money towards the universities and colleges to help them. And Doug Ford has not been doing that.
So pandemic has taken a huge toll on us. Most of us not feeling well. And it is incumbent upon it that if we say mental health is health, then we fund it appropriately. And I have proposed that we should treat mental health same as primary health care. It should be covered under OHIP. Access to mental health care and addiction services should be covered under OHIP. And so what I'm proposing to do is that we keep, if you're lucky to have a private insurance system, we keep your private insurance system, and if once you run out, we top it up. And those of us who do not have any private mental health care insurance, then that should be covered by OHIP. Every single person in this province. It is akin to having good primary health care. And this is how we're going to build a healthier, a productive economy. This is imperative for not only a society where our young people can strive and do well, but it's also for the well-being of our economy. And Ontario, again, in my view, can lead on that front.
Okay, thank you. So I'll have one more question, and then the elevator wrap up, and then I'll open it up to the audience. So Yasir, you are the last or the one to go next. You have spoken of a farm belt in your platform. Can you explain what you mean by investing in an infrastructure that supports this initiative, and how plausible is this plan in an urban-centric province where the majority of people are not centered on agriculture, understanding, and lifestyle?
Thank you for asking that question. Perfect timing to ask that question as we're just upon Thanksgiving. Look, I think as Liberals we should be very proud of the fact that we created the world's largest green belt. And even made Doug Ford, once he got caught with his hand in the cookie jar, to say, yeah, we're going to bring a law to protect the Greenbelt. Somebody said it's a law to stop Doug Ford from being Doug Ford. I think we need to take a step further. We need to protect all prime agricultural land in this province. Only 18% of land in Ontario could be used as agricultural land. And my proposal is that we create an Ontario farm belt. We work with farmers, we work with food processors, we work with local municipalities, and create a legislative framework where we can protect their land in perpetuity. Now, I think Ted has a better idea as to how we do it, and I'm totally comfortable with that. But I think the point is that once you pave land that can grow food, you can never undo it. We've lost that land forever to produce food, and I want to ensure that we protect that land forever and ever, so that we can grow good things in Ontario, as the jingle goes, and save and protect it in perpetuity. And I think the time has come for that idea to take fruition.
Go ahead.
So I would say two things to this. One is we've got to make sure that we protect and expand the Greenbelt and have an understanding of what the Greenbelt is. And the Greenbelt isn't only about protecting and conserving ecologically sensitive areas, it's also about preserving and protecting prime agricultural land. And so that is number one. Number two is how we go about expanding that, especially as it relates to farmland. You know, we've been on stage and Ted's talked about the Pennsylvania model around easements, and he'll speak to it, I have no doubt. And it's a smart model, because what it does is it properly compensates farmers for the value of their land as we look to protect their land as farmland. Now, when it comes to, I think more broadly, looking at agriculture and engaging in rural and agricultural communities, I think there are two things that we have to really focus on. One is that Doug Ford has taken for granted these communities, and we need to rebuild relationships in these communities, listen to and then act on the recommendations that come from these communities. So when I talk about integrated infrastructure and food security, that is based on recommendations that come directly from the Ontario Federation of Agriculture in meetings that I've had. And we've got to listen to that, incorporate that, and advocate for those ideas. The second thing is just around trust. That Doug Ford is not someone whose word you can trust. And in my experience in Kamloops and in Lambton County, one's word is everything. Integrity matters more than geography. Integrity is everything. We need leadership that acts with integrity.
So I have a vision for protecting prime agricultural land, but to do that, I need to stop urban sprawl. And to do that, we need to build more density in urban centers. So the housing policy that we share of building more density in urban areas fits really well with protecting prime agricultural land. I have this idea inspired by what they do in Pennsylvania of using farmland easements. And I could talk about that, happy to do that later. But I want to say something else, because Lois, you mentioned that we can often be urban-centric. And so I'm really worried about this sort of polarization in society. And there's different ways that we're polarized, left, right, whatever. But I think we should be it could be very damaging to be polarized between urban and rural parts of Ontario. And what I would say to the people in urban Ontario is, hey, where does your energy come from? Where's it gonna come from? Look at the wind farms, the solar farms, the energy storage projects, the gas plants, or any other plants, the nuclear plants. They're not in the middle of the big city. Cities depend on the whole rest of the province for food and energy and raw materials, and we need to work together, because the rural and northern areas depend on the cities for knowledge and research and training and communications with the rest of the world. So we have to. The Liberal Party is the party that brings different people together, and we should be trying to be the party that unpolarizes urban and rural.
Thank you. So we have one final question, and this is your 30-second one. And this is Raj's idea. You can hang on. No, we'll open it up after that. And the only question I had is who would like to go first and then second? And maybe, gentlemen, you can decide this on your own.
Everyone's gonna wanna go last, so you might as well pick one of us to go first.
Yeah,
I'll go first.
Okay, Nate first. And,
I'll be second.
okay, so we're just going.
I wanted to go last.
Or we're friendly, that's okay.
Yeah.
You're too friendly if you
You gotta
Might
go
be a little
slow.
less friendly if the other candidate was here, you know?
Maybe in the individual Q&A, you can give us a chance to rebut the other.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, okay, that sounds like a good idea.
This is your elevator speech, gentlemen.
Yes, so 30 seconds. Nate first, why are you the most qualified to be the next Premier of Ontario? Go.
So all three of us are qualified in many different ways. What do I bring specifically? I've been in Parliament for the last 8 years, and I have a track record of working across party lines, of effective advocacy for getting things done, but also strong local representation and speaking my mind on behalf of my community. And as that same grassroots advocacy and that willingness to be a bit more independent and deliver strong local representation, I think we need that in our politics as we look to rebuild the Ontario Liberal Party absolutely everywhere. We need competency, we need compassion, and above all, we need integrity in leadership.
I think that we're facing simultaneous crises that I don't have to list them all, but we have a lot of big problems. My strength is being able to connect with all sorts of different communities. I think we need to bring the whole province together to tackle cost of living, affordability, healthcare crisis, the climate crisis, and I can do that. So I come from a riding where I need to talk to farmers, I represent farmers, I have a big military base in my riding. I also have a science background and a business background, so I connect with a lot of people. We need to work together. I'm the one to do that.
Experience. I've served in provincial politics. I'm serving at the federal level. I know how to build coalitions and get things done. But more important than that, my lived experience. I'm an immigrant to Canada, came 35 years ago at age 15 with my family. And my family, like any immigrant family, really worked hard and built our lives from nothing. We need a leader who can relate to people, a leader that people can see themselves reflected in. That is how we're going to defeat Doug Ford in 2026. Thank you.
Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you so much to each of you for coming today. Now I want to open it up to the floor. We have time for a few questions. So do you want to stand and say your name and then give your question?
Yes, my name is Elizabeth Wood McDonald. As Elizabeth Wood, I was on City Council in the 80s and the 90s for 2 terms. I've also been president of the Riding Association Federal in the early 90s under Craig Chin, and most recently the Provincial Riding Association president under Kathleen Wynne. My question of the 3 of you is in relation to that something that my husband really gets upset about. And it was focused in the Globe and Mail about 3 weeks ago by a letter to the editor, which finally addressed the issue. And that's the issue that we in the province continue to have. And it is this. Toronto has the 2nd lowest mill rate in the whole of the province. We here have a house maybe of 400,000 and are paying 6,000 or 7,000 in rates. In Toronto, they're paying 6,000 or 7,000 for a house worth $1.5 million. We look at the real estate section of the Globe every week, and my husband really gets frustrated about this. My question of you is, what's your position, each of you, in relation to Metro Toronto continuing every year to ask the province to bail it out, this time for $100 million at least, from the taxpayers of the rest of the province who are paying their fair share already?
So I addressed this at the Toronto Metropolitan University Toronto Star debate, and our mill rate in Kingston is 1.3%, whereas it's 0.6% in Toronto. And you're right, Toronto has one of the lowest mill rates in the province. And what I said was, look, Toronto, if you want some help, we can sit down and talk about that, but you've got to put your property tax rate and other rates on the table as sources of revenue if you want help from the province, and they said, oh, let's get the federal government in. You're asking people from all across Canada and all across Ontario to help you out. Fine, Toronto is a really important asset for the province, but your property tax rate is so low, and not only is it low, it's been going down. That percentage has been going down for the last 10 or 15 years. So you have to be willing to put that on the table. You can't just ask for help from the federal and provincial governments.
And remember, Toronto have some other revenue tools available to them as well, which they're not using, because it just gets too political, right? Because you don't want to be seen as the government that's raising taxes or putting taxes in place. So I don't think you're going to hear a lot of dispute from Ted and I, and maybe in a difficult position being a resident of Toronto on this issue. But I think it highlights a bigger problem. I think it highlights a bigger problem, which is that property taxes as a source of revenue for municipalities is probably the most ineffective way of raising revenues for really important service that we require municipalities to provide. And I'm glad that Doug Ford has taken the step of coming with a new deal with Toronto. That conversation needs to happen across the province, because a lot of municipalities, including my hometown of Ottawa, is having a serious challenge, especially as we come out of the pandemic. And province, it really, I think it's at the province's feet to take leadership role in developing a better way of raising revenues. Sales tax, I'll say this here today, sales tax is a really good way perhaps of looking at it. Either sharing part of the HST with municipalities or looking at an additional a point on sales tax and maybe in lieu of property tax, and that math needs to be done. But a system that is more equitable across the province to ensure that all of you get equitable services as well available to you, regardless of the circumstance and the number of properties you have in your community.
So far be it for me to ask for more taxes on myself, but I will say that I do think it is unfair when you look at the now, apples that have to be compared to apples, and not all assessments consider including water, for example, and so we have to make sure apples are apples, but still when you compare apples to apples, Toronto is still under applying property taxation as compared to other municipalities. And so there's got to be, when you look at it from a provincial level, or as we've looked at it from a federal level, and we've said to the city, we're not always going to be there to bail you out if you're not doing your fair share of bringing your own revenues to the table. Now, some municipalities, including Toronto, they need new revenue tools, and it's not just about property taxation, although I think we can think a little bit more intelligently about how we also apply property taxation even within an urban center like Toronto and large urban centers. For example, I'm not such a fan of allowing, giving a component of HST to municipalities, sure. But looking at additional sales taxation on a municipal basis, I'm not a fan of it all, because I don't think someone earning $45,000 in the city should be paying more. And it's very complicated to address the regressive nature of sales taxes unless you have a rebate, and the city I don't think is well equipped to deliver that. Whereas progressive property taxation, so if there's $1 million home in my riding, they have one tax, and if there's a $4 million home in my riding, and there are both, there's a $4 million home, they can afford more. And I do think the province can enable different tools to municipalities, including the city, to make sure that they are taxing on a fair basis, but they're going to get more out of the residents and pay their fair share as far as it goes. The last thing I'll say with the time I've got is there are some unique issues that do impact different municipalities. So for example, when we had the asylum seeker issue and homelessness particularly impacting not just Toronto, but also Ajax and some of the surrounding area, it did make sense for the feds to come in with dollars. So as a general rule, I think fairness, and then specifically where there are acute issues that impact certain municipalities, then it makes sense to accommodate.
For example, cities on borders, a lot of the time it's the municipal police that have to deal with some of the drug trafficking across the borders, more than in the other cities. And that's another case where it makes sense for the province or the federal government to come in, because it's an international border, and say, okay, you have an additional burden, and it's fair for everybody else in the province and the country to help you out.
And Ted's talked about uploading certain infrastructure as well, and it applies to Toronto, but it applies to other municipalities as well, where there's certain infrastructure that benefits not just that municipality, but benefits the broader region. Then it does make sense to look at how do we share costs across the region, across the province to different degrees. But as a general principle, there absolutely has to be fairness.
Thank you.
Would you like to ask the license plate question now?
Oh, yes, please. I've been we're political junkies and have been our whole lives. The one thing that got the most attention from the bar downstairs and other bars that I attend, which are nice, when Doug Ford said license plate fees are cut to zero, not one person on the very left or very right said, that's a really good idea. Everybody said, that's the stupidest idea they've ever heard. How will you guys treat that when you come to power?
I'm happy to start because I was on the radio saying that was such a dumb idea. And more to the point, not just a dumb idea, but think of the opportunity cost. Think of what you can do with $1 billion a year. We don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough healthcare professionals. We got a health human resource crisis. I mentioned underinvestment in public education. We need more heat pumps and climate solutions absolutely everywhere. What does $1 billion a year get you? Well, it should get you a lot more than license plate stickers. And so I think we made a mistake in many ways by not really going after that, not just on the basis of this is ridiculous, but also on the basis of what a mismanagement of our finances as a province. And we cannot allow the Conservatives to own the issue of responsible fiscal management, and they should never own that issue when they're making decisions like that. So the short answer is we should reverse many of these changes, restore a sense of fiscal responsibility, and make sure we're delivering dollars. When we do spend those dollars, we spend them wisely where we're going to get a return.
I think that's the way to go, is to not talk so much about you got some money back, is to say, well, you can't find a family doctor, your kids can't afford a house, the business can't afford to hire entry-level employees. Really related to those everyday things. Your neighbor, somebody with ODSP has like $200 or $300 left for the month to buy everything. 50% of people in Ontario are living paycheck to paycheck. And those are the people that we want to communicate to and say, listen, we need to fix big things, and that you don't even have a car. And a lot of people you can talk to that way and say, these are the everyday things that you need, and Doug Ford is not addressing them.
So what he got for $1 billion or so is 80 some odd seats in the legislature, right? That's what he got for it. He bribed us by our own money. And we have to be really mindful of it from a retail perspective when we go in the next election, how we frame the conversations. I'm agreeing with my friends. Guess what's coming? I can put money on the table to tell you that he's going to dangle some other kind of a tax cut come next election for all the money he's not spending on healthcare and education. And all of us, because we'll be working together in that campaign, would have to come up with a really thoughtful way of talking about healthcare and our public schools and how we're going to restore that level of service that all of you deserve, and how the money will be be spent wisely. But it will require some very clear retail messaging so people could understand, because it was really easy for him to sell that $90 or so off your license plate, right? And so, the guy's a populist. I think, Nate, you said it's not in a Trumpian sense, but he's a populist in terms of he likes to be popular. And that was a popular move that he deployed. And we would, as soon as this leadership is over, whoever is the leader of our party, we would have to start working together very thoughtfully and carefully in building the narrative, building the case for investing in our healthcare system, in our education system. We cannot just wait till election time to make that argument. We have to build a foundation, the basis for it, all the way to June 2nd, 2026.
Excellent, thank you. One final question from Bernie. Yes, Bernie.
Let me bring up official party status. How do you feel about not being an official party, but yet having, as I remember from the popular vote, we have 25% or more of the popular vote of Ontarians. And yet, we have decimal 1% more than the NDP, who are an official party. How can we correct that?
Well, I think a very simple way, I would be willing to change the stand, because if you fight over, we can talk about electoral reform, but if you fight over electoral reform, it takes a while. But with a stroke of the pen, we could change the standing orders in the Ontario legislature so that any political party that got 10% of the vote or more gets official party status, irrespective of the number of the seats that they got. And I think that would be a pretty fair way of doing things, and it has that a little taste of proportional representation, but that's what I would do. If you get 10% of the popular vote, you get to be an official party status. Now, right now, we don't have official party status. We only have 9 members. We need 12. Doug Ford changed it from 8 to 12 when he took power. That's $2 million per year of funding that we don't have as a Liberal caucus. It means we don't have money for communications, for policy research, for the Leaders Tour. We have to work around that, and I think it'll be important for the next leaders to be able to work very, very closely with the caucus. We've got to share resources, we've got to share our legislative assistance, work with whatever the party can give us. Right now the party provides just one communications person, but we're gonna have to scrape and back each other up, work together very, very closely. And that's, if I could do a shameless plug for myself, I am of all Liberal MPPs and Liberal MPs in Ontario, I'm the one that has spent the longest time as a member of the third party caucus, where you have to scratch for every interview with the press, scratch for every dollar fundraising. You've got to rebuild the party and work very hard to get attention. So as leader, whoever is the leader has to do that for 2.5 years, and I have been doing that.
So I want more people to vote. I obsess about this. I love voting. I voted for the very first time in my life in 1992. After 3.5 years living in Canada, became a Canadian citizen. Charlottetown Accord was the referendum that I voted the first time, and I've been hooked. And I want to make sure that more people do get to vote. Whether electoral reform will fulfill the purpose, maybe to some extent, but not all the way. I think what really will fulfill the purpose is making sure that political parties, especially a party like ours, talks to people like equal, and talk about issues that are relatable to them. 1 million Ontarians, 1 million Liberal voters did not come out and vote last election, provincial election. Why? Because they did not see themselves reflected. They didn't vote Conservative or NDP, that they just sat at home. I think that was not their failure, that was our failure as the Ontario Liberal Party. And under my leadership, the focus is going to be practical Liberal ideas that will make your life easier to live. Let's talk about practical ideas that people can see, yeah, this actually may help me. This may actually get me a family doctor that I'm looking for. This actually will result in my child who have special needs get better education in school. This actually will result in more housing getting built in our communities. That's what we need to focus on. Our job is not to tell people how to live their lives. Our job is to make their lives easier to live, and under my leadership, I really want to focus on that practical aspect so we can get more people come out to vote, because when more people do that, our democracy is better and it will be reflected in the results in the legislature as well.
So the short answer, when you have a party that receives 24-25% of the popular vote and only, 7% of the seats in the House, well, you would deliver electoral reform to solve that problem. Now, my experience in federal politics, you may remember a 2015 promise that 2015 would be the last election under first past the post. And so I don't think if I were to go out there as leader and say 2026 will be the last election under first past the post, that so many people would believe me. Now, I was one of 2 Liberals to vote for that promise in the House, and I apologize for that broken promise. And I believe very strongly and sincerely in changing how we vote. So we've got to restart that conversation. I think a citizens' assembly and a good faith effort, multi-party approach is a good way of restarting that conversation. In the meantime, though, we have 9 seats at Queen's Park, and we've got to rebuild this party. And actually, as much of a challenge as it's going to be, it's also why I'm running, because there's an opportunity to actually rebuild how we do politics in a serious way. And this room is great to have so many people, and we need to bring new people into our party, and we need people to be excited to vote. And I don't think we get people excited to vote by being the Not Doug Ford party. We tried that the last election. We're not Doug Ford, the choice is yours. And people stayed home. And we have to deliver and re-articulate the values. Why are we liberals? Strong economic agenda, seriousness, confidence. I don't see the seriousness I want to see at Queen's Park. We need fairness, compassion, as I described, and above all things, if people are going to trust in the possibility of politics, we have to keep our word, do the things we say we are going to do, and act with integrity. It's the most important value in politics. We need big ideas, and we need ambitious ideas, and we talk about healthcare or housing, education, climate action. We need to deliver serious solutions on the big picture challenges all across the province, and then ultimately, it's about relationships. It's about all of us rebuilding relationships and having a strong, active presence in every single community. That's how we're going to rebuild this party, and we've got to make sure we are seen as, and we are, the real progressive alternative to Ford. Otherwise, there's going to be more vote splitting come the next election.
Gentlemen, thank you. And for everyone who came out today, thank you so much for your commitment to Liberal politics and to the issues that matter to this community. We have 7 minutes left in our forum, so if Ted's got to fly. I don't know if the other two gentlemen have to go right away, but if you want to chat with them and have a little more food before you go, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for coming today and for making the time for Sarnia-Lambton and for being open to this informal forum as well. So thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
We should especially thank these two because while I came late, I was going to be here already this weekend to celebrate Thanksgiving with family in Kimilaki, whereas they've made a special trip, all things considered. So, a special thank you for coming on Thanksgiving. Yeah.
So everybody's not going to do any loss for Thanksgiving? Is that?
Who's got the turkey?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
I have to tell you, so we talked about broadband at the last debate, and I was thinking, so I started hosting this podcast in the pandemic because you couldn't do in-person meetings in quite the same way. And I remember sitting outside of the gas station because Terry didn't have internet that was of a sufficient quality to do the podcast. And so I'm sitting in the car recording a podcast with Eric Duncan, this Conservative MP, and outside of a gas station because of internet. So, and now there's Starlink at the farm, so I'm looking forward this weekend to having good internet.